Oh, there we go. It's left and right. Okay. Um, so I was invited to talk about a few things, in particular the upcoming budget, and some of the approaches that we're taking to fight against offshore oil. I also thought it'd be good to do some updates on some projects that we're working on. I don't have that much time, so I'm going to try to get through this efficiently, and hopefully this will be informative for you all. But in terms of the budget, we're facing a much more difficult situation than we earlier anticipated. A lot of that is due to the HR1 cuts at the federal government. That's really going to have major impacts on the county, along with the fact that, because of the storms going back to as far back as 2017, we still haven't gotten FEMA reimbursements. And so we've had to take on debt to try to make sure that we can fix our roads and get reimbursed by FEMA. But obviously, working with the federal government, especially FEMA right now, is equally challenging. So initially, the county thought that we were going to have about a $5.4 million deficit. That's actually being projected to about $23 million deficit. And because of the fact that these cuts that have come at the federal level and trying to work through paying off our debt service, the long-term prediction is much worse than that. So I'm going to go through these three topics: HR1, the disaster reimbursements, and labor costs. So counties are mandated by the state to provide medical and food assistance. So federal funding comes to the state. We bill the state for those services. The state then uses federal and state funding to reimburse us. But with HR1, this is going to be the largest federal cut to healthcare and food assistance in history. And a good chunk of that funding will be, completely eliminated for the state, or it's going to be really challenging for people to qualify for that funding. And so, what we're really looking at here is about a $25.6 million loss to the county in terms of funding from the HR1 impacts. And that's for substance use disorder treatment, behavioral health, Medicruise, CalFresh, just to give you a sense. And there's a variety of other services as well that will be impacted and that we won't have the funding to run. Additionally, as I mentioned before, with the 2017 storms, COVID-19, the CZU fires, the 2023 storms, and we had a little bit of I wouldn't say disaster, but we had some impacts from the 2024 storms that we can bill FEMA for. And that gray area at the top kind of represents, or on each of those bars represents what we've been able to receive in terms of FEMA reimbursements. So there's a lot of outstanding FEMA reimbursements that we're in debt for. We took out about $80 million in debt so that we could, fix roads and do all the improvements that were necessary. And again, we're just waiting to get paid back. Some of these projects, as we're learning through our public works staff, we may never get reimbursed for. But we're hoping that we can continue to push on our federal representatives. It's crazy. We still get some trickle through funding that the feds, wanted to take away, but we're still able to get some of those grants. But we have about 58 million now in outstanding FEMA reimbursements. And so additionally, in terms of labor, the county has used a different model, which due to high cost of living and high cost of labor, obviously, to meet those demands, we went from what was a $7.4 million deficit to a $22 million deficit based on those labor issues. And then again, that next bar that's kind of below at the 25.6, that's the impacts from HR1. So the county is working on a variety of different approaches to try to get us to that third bar, which is to overcome some of those deficits, but that's still going to leave us at about $23 million deficit for the upcoming budget. So this slide really is just going to show that, in the top section of the slide where the line graphs are, our expenses are much higher than our revenues currently. Some of that, again, from debt service, having to pay down the debt and wait for our FEMA reimbursements. But we're hoping we can kind of bring that together over time. But structurally, as we go from the 25, 26 towards the 32, 33 bars, I mean, the impacts that we're going to be facing are significant and severe. And, we're going to be trying to do everything we can to be able to address these issues. So in terms of short-term solutions, in this budget, we're looking at eliminating vacancies and restricting travel for vacant positions that are funded, that we're unable to get people in those positions to kind of bring that the deficit down. We're continuing to work on getting our FEMA reimbursements matched at CSAC from the state level. And so CSAC is the California State Association of Counties. I'm the representative for Santa Cruz County on that board. We recently had a retreat, and CSAC, that represents all 58 counties for the state of California, their approach is, for the short term, with the deficits we're facing in this coming year, we really need the state to step up. I mean, we provide services for the state, and given the fact that we have these federal cuts, counties shouldn't be placed in a position where we're on the hook to try to figure out how to pay for everything. The state should be the one stepping up. They have a much bigger budget. It turns out this year, because of the revenue they've been generating from AI companies, they actually currently are seeing more revenue coming in than they anticipated. And so from our perspective, it's like, you should help us out. And, hopefully, if we're able to flip Congress in November, there is an opportunity for some of these changes to be made at the federal level, and hopefully we can be put back in a better place. Lastly, because we're in such a chaotic time, the county is also considering declaring a fiscal emergency. Our county CAO has been working with our state representatives to pass legislation that will allow us to put a temporary sales tax on the ballot in November. We would need to vote on that. It would be for 4 years, and that funding that was generated through that temporary sales tax will be used for food assistance and medical coverage that will be cut from that is the result of the HR 1 cuts. So what I just showed you was pretty much what we received in terms of our mid-year budget update back in January. The budget will be released tomorrow. So understanding what the county is going to do to fill these gaps, that budget comes out tomorrow. We're going to have our first meeting to go over broadly the budget on May 5th. The board meeting starts at 9 a.m. We meet at the county building for those people who may want to come in person. Otherwise, you can join on Zoom. It will be recorded. So if people want to go back and watch that presentation again at a later time, it's there. And then we'll have individual department hearings starting on June 10th and on June 11th. And then on June 30th, we will adopt our final budget. Okay, so that has gotten us through the budget, and I think I'm doing pretty good on time. So I'm going to go into, all right, awesome. Great. So the next topic I was asked to speak about is protecting our coast from offshore drilling. I've been leading an effort statewide, and I'll get into that right now. So when Donald Trump took office, he immediately issued an executive order in January of 2025 called Unleashing America's Energy Act, which got many of us nervous around, the fact that was largely meaning more oil extraction on land and in our oceans. And then in April of 2025, he released another executive order, Unleashing America's Offshore Critical Minerals and Resources. And that got us concerned with what that may mean for our marine and coastal environments. On April 30th, a request for information for the 11th National Outer Continental Shelf Oil and Gas Leasing Comment Program opened, which led us to believe this is actually going to start happening. And then in November of last year, from November to January of this year, there was a comment period open for the 11th National Outer Continental Shelf Oil and Gas Leasing Program, which is projected to have 6 offshore leases for the state of California. And so this is just a map. This oil and gas leasing program is targeting all the waters around Alaska, the Gulf of Mexico, and there are 6 lease sales off the coast of California. I will say that in October of 2025, initially they were going to plan on having all of the coast open for oil and gas leasing. There was a leak in the Houston Chronicle. Folks in all the other red states found out that this leasing activity was going to happen in their states. They got pissed off, and so the Trump administration removed the East Coast of the United States, Washington and Oregon, and really left in California as one of the big targets. So fortunately, in going back in time a bit, the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act Amendment of 1978 significantly expanded the role of local governments in this process, establishing formal input procedures, though it didn't grant us leasing authority. So while we can't say no directly, we do have a role in providing input into this process. The Secretary of Interior must consider the balance between national energy interest and the well-being of local communities and the impact on local communities when evaluating recommendations from the governor. And governors are required to share proposed leasing programs with local governments upon request, ensuring that local leaders and communities have access to information about these lease sales. And so the good news is that this public process for providing comments needs to be taken seriously, needs to be weighed against energy interests and opportunities in other places. And the governor's recommendations are going to be really helpful for us to fight back on this. And so just to kind of outline what this process looks like, they have the National Outer Continental Shelf Program, which is the opportunity to show where the lease sales would be, get input from local communities. They then move into the lease sale portion where they sell actual tracts of ocean areas for the purposes of oil extraction. They then have exploration plans where they have boats that go out, they shoot down pulses of air that bounce off the ocean floor, and they have sensors that can sense and detect where or oil deposits may be for extraction. And then they move forward with developing the oil rigs and moving forward with oil extraction. And so this is kind of what the process looks like. There's a number of different times. There's 45-day periods, 60-day periods, 90-day comment periods where we can submit input. And what we've been doing is trying to submit input as frequently and often as possible. And in general, I mean, this plan would take a pretty long time, but the Trump administration has been advancing this much more rapidly than we've seen in the past. So just to give you an example, this is the section that would be considered for the lease sales that's outlined in black. Those smaller squares are the different tracts that would be sold. And as you can see, the coast around the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary and the other sanctuaries that go up and down the Central and North California coast, or this is the Central Coast, I'm sorry, are all being considered in this lease plan. And then again, for Southern California, this is what the planning area looks like. Even in areas that have military installations or are used for military purposes, and that's been one of the areas we've also been pushing back on. So again, to go back in time a little bit, as we mentioned, the leasing program and the governing acts around that were changed in 1978 to allow for local input. And from 1980 to 1994, Gary Patton, who was the 3rd District Supervisor at the time, when lease sales were happening, more in the southern part of California, but making their way north, he decided that, we should put together a group to help push against this. And so they established themselves as the Local Government Outer Continental Shelf Coordination Program. And it was a group of cities and counties up and down the coast, nonpartisan group that worked to stop offshore oil from occurring on the coast. They were also very instrumental at creating the national marine sanctuaries that have added more protections to the coast. And so after I learned about this, because Andy Schifrin, who works in my office, was around at that time and informed of this coalition, we reached out to the former director, who's still very active, and asked if he'd be willing to help us again, which he agreed to. And so we have now restarted this coalition through my office called the Save My Coast Coalition. So in June of last year, we got the Santa Cruz Board of Supervisors to unanimously adopt resolution opposing new and existing offshore oil and gas activities. And then in June of 2025, June 24th, 2025, put an item on our agenda to reestablish this local government coordination group. And we entered into a contract with the previous executive director, Richard Charter. And so it took a bit of nudging. I think when the November comment period opened, people's eyes really started opening. Went to the CSAC conference and was having conversations with folks. At that time, we had maybe Humboldt and Sonoma, but today we have 12 out of the 15 coastal counties who are part of this. The 3 counties we don't have as of right now are Del Norte, that voted no, Orange County, which was a split vote, so that failed. And then we've had trouble getting San Francisco County to answer the phone. So we're still working on San Francisco, and we're not really surprised by Orange and Del Norte just due to the demographics there, but we do have all 12. We have 12 out of the 15 coastal counties who've all joined this coalition to push back. We also have the city of Santa Cruz, the city of Monterey. We've got Half Moon Bay, and a couple other cities that have joined. It's been a little bit slower to get the cities to join the coalition, but we have had a lot of success with getting cities to submit comments in opposition. And so all the cities include, Santa Cruz, Capitola, Solano Beach, Coronado, Laguna Beach, Newport Beach, Seaside, Monterey, Half Moon Bay, Encinitas, Marina, Pacific Grove, Santa Barbara, and we're continuing to do the work to get more of the cities on board. And we have, at a minimum, gotten at least a letter from every single county, even the ones who didn't join. At least we got their supervisors to submit letters of opposition, the ones who are supportive. And so it's questionable whether everything that's happening is even legal. But what we've seen from this administration is that the law doesn't matter to them. And so we've been doing everything we can to try to make sure that people are aware of what's happening, make sure that they know when the comments periods are happening. We're making sure that we're submitting comments as frequently as we can, because really at the end of the day, we want to build a strong legal record so that when the time comes, we can sue the Trump administration. So did all talking about offshore oil and gas, but again, another threat that's new that wasn't around in the past is deep sea mining off of our coast. They've already started that comment period for Alaska. And here in Santa Cruz, what's concerning is that off the central coast, kind of south of Monterey Bay, we have the Davidson Seamount, where there are metal deposits. We have had conversations with Gary Griggs, and some of the conversations we've had with him is those may be hard to extract, and we don't necessarily have the technology to conduct those extractions at this point in time. But if those tracks are sold, that means that as our technology improves, they could still be a threat. And so we're taking this very seriously as well. To date, the target areas by this administration have been America Samoa, Northern Mariana Islands, the Virginia coastline, and all waters off the coast of Alaska. And so we're equally concerned that California might be another target for this. And so again, we're trying to make sure that people are aware of what's happening and how we can push back. Another way that we're pushing back, and this actually came out of something that Gary Patton organized back in the 80s, was that while we don't have necessarily control over federal waters, we do have local control over our land. And so what they did is they organized back in the 80s ordinances, putting them on the ballot and getting people to vote to say that if we're going to make a land use change that would allow for oil processing or receiving facilities, it has to go to a vote of the people. And so they did this effort back in the day. And so all those counties that are in blue, which we call the blue wall, those are all the counties that have adopted ordinances of some sort that either ban oil processing facilities on land outright, or say that it has to come to a vote of the people. And the reason why we said that is because legally we're saying it's not that you can't do it, it's that the people have to vote to allow for it to happen, which is held up in court in the past. And so we're working with Save Our Shores right now with the Mills Law Center. We use some of our Measure K funding from our sales tax measure. Thank you for that. They were able to work with the Mills Law Center to bring forward ordinance language changes that would update our ordinances for deep seabed mining and strengthen them around oil and gas leasing. My office and Supervisor Kim DeSerpa, we're going to be putting that on the agenda in the coming months. We just got done going through legal review, and that's going to be placed on the ballot in November. And so we will have an opportunity to vote on that to update and strengthen our local ordinance. So again, our objectives as a coalition are really trying to keep people up to speed with what's happening in this federal process. We're submitting comments and resolutions on behalf of our counties and cities, and we're encouraging folks to submit their own comments. In the last comment period, I think we had over 300,000 comments that were submitted in opposition of offshore oil and gas drilling. And that was up from around 100,000 during the first iteration. But there are groups that are forming up and down the state now that this is becoming something that people are aware of. And again, we're really trying to build a legal record so that we can fight back. So yeah, the Trump administration is moving at lightning speed, and we're trying to do everything we can to push back. The website you can go to is called savemycoast.org. That's the coalition website. You can sign up to receive our newsletter. You can go there to find out updates on what's happening. And we actually worked with Senator Laird's office, and I was able to connect with the Attorney General's office on Monday. And for our next coalition meeting, we're going to have a representative, hopefully, from the Attorney General's office who will meet with us to update us on how we can join the state and if they're, because they're planning something, some legal action to take, but they can't talk to us about it unless we have a formalized memorandum of understanding and confidentiality. So we're going to work to figure out what that process is so that we can join the state, learn more about what they're doing, and then when time's ready, we can all fire at once and join their lawsuit. So that's more or less going to summarize that. And then I just wanted to touch on a few projects that are touching on Bonnie Doon in general. So we had received some complaints about, well, there was a couple crashes just off Ice Cream Grade and Pine Grade. Um, some of the residents made us aware. We put them in touch with county staff. County staff suggested that one of the potential improvements would be some tree removal up here. I think that before we do that, we want to make sure that people know where that is and what trees those are, and understand the visual improvements that will be made from that removal. But wanted to let you all know that we've been in conversation, and I'll once I'm finished, solve the question. But that's we're not sure if that's going to be the best solution, but we want to work with the community on how we can improve that intersection. Yesterday or on Tuesday, yesterday during our board meeting, we had an update on the McDermott fire situation that happened down there at and it turns out the smoke and water damage, they thought that the work was going to be done by about a week ago, and with most projects, it usually takes a little bit longer than anticipated. So they're hoping that the water and smoke damage and repairs will be done in about a month, and along with the bay door that was damaged there during the fire. In terms of the cell tower, there's been a proposal by a company to put a cell tower in there. They've been challenging to work with, and that would be to replace the cow that's out there right now. So we're continuing to have those conversations. We're also considering putting our own tower in as the county because we own the property. And if we own the property, then let's put our own tower in. That way we would charge the people, the different companies who'd want to attach to the facility. And so we generate revenue that could come back into the community from improved cell reception. We'd had some conversations around Martin Station. It actually turned out we had a meeting with CAL FIRE and some Bonnie Doon residents about the Martin Station and potential upgrades. And that night was when the McDermott Station fire happened. And one of the things that brought to our attention, which I'm sure folks are aware, is it's really important to have redundancies. And what we've heard from CAL FIRE is that the Martin Station does not meet the national standard currently. And so we want to have an opportunity to have a conversation with folks around what it could look like to have a new station where the Martin Station is that is county property. So it'd be something that we could do. We want to do that in collaboration with the community. But right now, with Prop 4 funding, with Measure Q, we do have the potential to secure some funding that can help us make improvements and that would overall improve, the potential for fire safety here in Bonnie Doon. And so those conversations are just happening, but I wanted to, since I haven't had a chance to speak to you all publicly, just want to bring that to folks' attention that we want to work with you all to get some feedback on that. And in terms of North Coast, as you all see, the rail trail is kind of making its way north. The Panther Beach parking is open. We're going to have a ribbon cutting for that soon. The bathrooms will be open soon. They're going to be working on the Davenport parking lot next. We were having conversations about improvements to Cement Plant Road. And at Shark Fin, we have already launched looking at planning for improving that parking lot. And last week, we got a $350,000 grant from the Coastal Conservancy that will cover the planning for that parking lot, and we're going to continue moving forward with trying to secure funding so we can make improvements in that parking lot as well. So that wraps it up for me. Stay tuned for the county budget. As I mentioned, it's going to be released tomorrow. The Save My Coast Coalition is working hard to defend against offshore oil. And the projects I mentioned, really want to make sure that we're in communication about these different improvements that are going to happen up in Bonnie Doon and up in the North Coast. And with that, I'll take some questions if I have time. Okay. But yes, this is what the county staff is saying to us. The accidents that we met with a couple residents who showed us pictures about a few accidents that happened up here. I think they were with like I'm trying to remember. I think one was a FedEx like van, and there was another accident that happened. So they're asking us for improvements. The county staff were saying that there's no way we can make, better turning lanes. They said the only thing we could do is make visual improvements. I just drove around, I mean, it's the intersection right there, and I don't understand what they were talking about. So we're not moving forward with it yet. That's why I wanted to come and just brief the community. I think we need to have county staff come out and show like exactly where they're talking about, and then receiving feedback from you all will help us determine whether we move forward with that or not. Right.
You don't have a lot of visibility.
Got it. Okay. I think that's what they're talking about, maybe. Yeah. So, but I think that warrants, future conversations still to better understand what county staff is talking about. And so we're happy to have them come to an RBDA meeting, or we can hold a one-off meeting to discuss that.
Paving, ice cream.
I can bring it up with county staff if that's okay. We'll have to look to see if that's a county road or if that's a private road.
Yeah.
Okay.
Never made it approved, but it's all just been sealed and gravel. It's just layers of steel.
Okay. I can talk to county staff about that. And if you follow up with an email on that, I can connect with county staff so we can see if we can get that in queue. I know right now there's the Measure D funding that we have from the gas tax. A lot of that's going to be going towards improvements on Empire Grade because that is an evacuation route. And so that right now is the priority, but we just finished with Swanton Road, and we're going to be looking at more projects to do. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yep. Any other questions? Yeah.
The FEMA money.
Yeah.
Missing FEMA money. That's a lot of money. What are your thoughts on the probability of collecting them?
It's very slow, and it will be slower if we don't have a new administration sooner. So, I mean, that's pretty much where we're at. So we're slowly having to pay off the debt insurance as we have those bonds because if we can get the money, the FEMA reimbursements, we can pay down the bond money, and that will help us save money in terms of the debt service we have to pay on that. But until we get that money, we're going to be just constantly paying it off. So we're hoping, that something budges, but right now it's not looking good. It's not looking good in the short term. I think there will be a change at some point in the administration. Hopefully we don't have too many disasters between now and then. And we're fortunate that this year we had a pretty mild winter, but we are very concerned with if we have another fire, if we have another, 2023 storm event that happens and what that will mean in terms of how we'll be able to fix our roads. Yeah. And our infrastructure. Sure.
So, question, is there like an expiration date at which, the funds that we requested from FEMA will be?
I don't think so, just because of the fact that we still have 2017 applications in. If you think about it, for all the different disasters that are occurring around the states where everybody's submitting, FEMA applications. And so, when they cut their staff and to, a skeleton crew that has to review all these applications. They're just going to sit for years. And so, best thing we can do is try to get a better administration, and hopefully they'll prioritize reimbursing folks. It is the one bipartisan thing that I think, red and blue states do agree on, is that we need to have FEMA be effective. And then it just comes down to who they're going to prioritize in that process. And obviously they've got, a gripe with California, but we're going to continue to, let our federal representatives know that we're not getting reimbursed and we need this money.
Okay, there's a chat question. I had submitted my concern about roadside camping on Empire Grade. I've spoken with Santa Cruz Deputy David Madison, and he states that County Code 97620 precludes parking except within 1,000 feet of private property with authorization from the owner. Can you help us curtail this road camping?
So the question for folks online is about road camping and being able to curtail road camping. We can follow up with the sheriff's department to see if there's something that we can do and what needs to be done. I know that they've been working on road camping up in Davenport, like along Highway 1. And so there is a mechanism to address it. And so we'll just have to figure out like what we can do to help the sheriff's staff feel more comfortable with moving forward with that. But yeah, we're happy to help.
What is the best way for anyone up here in Bonnie Doon to report failures of the roadway resulting in large potholes? We have currently on Bonnie Doon Road on the southbound lane from there, probably a half mile to a mile going downhill into a 90-degree blind turn. We have major sections of roadway that are failing, that are resulting in large potholes, and especially down on the far end when you approach that 90-degree turn, it's a blind turn. You actually have to go into an opposing lane to avoid these. What is the best way to get public works attention on something of this size?
Yeah, so the question for folks online is, how do we get public works attention when it comes to potholes and road conditions? And I would say the best thing to do is email my office, justin.cummings@santacruzcountyca.gov. And we've been very successful when people have had potholes. They send us pictures, they give us a location, and we send it to Public Works. And generally, they're really good about getting out and fixing them. Yep. Yep. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. You're even busier than I thought. Okay, let's see if I can shift gears here. Our next speaker is Eric Gross, and he is the current superintendent and principal at Pacific Elementary in Davenport. And Eric's a graduate of UCSC and then entered into, he's a true educator. He's been in the local school system in a variety of positions, and now he's in Davenport. And he's come up, I think, with an incredible idea. It really shows some vision and a lot of hope. And so I'm very excited about hearing about it. And so if I can do this correctly, I'm going to have Eric come up and take it away. Thank you.
So thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this crazy idea, and hopefully you'll like it, or maybe you'll have some questions and it'll help me figure out how to make it better. So I'm sure all of you know about the cement plant in Davenport. It's been around for over 100 years, and during that time, it's had a lot of positive effects, like some good jobs, and it's more recently turned some property into the Chitoni Coast Dairies National Monument, and it has a proud history of having helped rebuild San Francisco after the 1906 earthquake, the Panama Canal, Pearl Harbor, and many dams. It's also had some negative effects. It's had pollution and waste, and it currently has a wreck sitting on the property. And I think both things can be true at the same time. It's been both positive and negative, but for the last 15 years, it's mainly just been vacant. And I think whether you focus on a positive or negative part of the history or both, it's history, and it's time to turn that history into something happening in the present. This person I met described it as turning the ghost into a town. I like that phrase. Didn't forward. What do I need to do to make it go forward? There we go. Can I move this out of the way? There we go. Whoa. Need to do that. You all dizzy here. There we go. Oh, my paper touched the mouse. So I like this image because it shows the stark contrast between the natural beauty of the Central Coast and the reality of what's left of the cement plants. You have all this natural beauty, but you also have all this pollution. I don't know if any were there, but I think in 2017, Pacific Elementary hosted a meeting, maybe it was 2018, about a possible reuse plan for the property. And if I remember correctly, they identified, they call it characterized, somewhere around 20 different cleanups that needed to happen there, 2 of which were significant, the others of which seemed more feasible. But the bottom line is you got pollution on the site that's progressively getting worse if you don't deal with it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Should I just stand closer? Or?
Yeah. That, and see if I can turn this up without causing any, where is it? Boop, boop, boop. I think that's.
I can also use my principal voice. It works well in the playground, but I try not to shout when I'm in a room with people. At this meeting, they identified some cleanups that needed to happen. That's being done currently. It seems to me to be kind of a slow process, but they are working on it. Something else that I think is worth mentioning is that, if you talk to people in government, they will tell you that there is a master plan. I don't think that historically there's been a master plan. This is my opinion, because you've got this weird situation in Davenport where you have Old Town, you have New Town, they're not connected, and in the middle is this factory that's not running. And you wind up having challenges like being able to get from New Town to Old Town safely. I have kids that come from New Town trying to get to school, and they have to go on the highway. And so I think you have this lack of cohesion, and you have a design that doesn't meet current needs. You also have this weird situation where you have houses, but no more jobs because there's no more cement plants. You have a situation where there's a really high cost of living and a lack of houses, especially since the CZU fire. And you have this strange phenomenon where most of the people who work in Davenport live in Santa Cruz, and most of the people who live in, most of the people who live in Davenport work in Santa Cruz, most people who live in Santa Cruz work in Davenport, and you've got this cross commute going on. None of the institutions in Davenport, including the school, can pay our workers enough to be able to afford to live there. And all the stores, there's 1 store and 3 restaurants, we all struggle, and all the nonprofits that are there struggle. It's not because the institutions are bad, it's just because of the design and the economic reality. And you've got a property, the cement plant, that is currently just an expense for the company, for Cemex. They're paying taxes, they paying a security guard, but it's not bringing in any income. And what I don't see, this is what I mean by a master plan, is what I don't see is an effort to address these realities. Wrong direction. There we go. I can tell you in ad nauseum, in detail, if you want, about how the elementary school struggles. I've applied for every grant there is on construction for schools, gotten all of them, and we've passed local bonds. We still don't have nearly enough money to do the construction that we need, and we're so close to the ocean that everything rusts immediately and falls apart. If you've been there on campus recently for the last 9 years, there's been a blue building that's supposed to be a community meeting center as well as classrooms. Well, when the state invented the grade of transitional kindergarten, we didn't have extra room. So we moved into that space, and now it can no longer be used as a community meeting space. It can be, but it's got preschool equipment in it. Not the best seating if you're sitting through a meeting. There are 2 fire stations, one in Swanton and one right in Davenport. The one in Swanton almost burned down during CZU, which is ironic. And then the one in Davenport is in this picture in the background there. It's apparently supposed to be staffed by volunteers, but there's no volunteers. This picture is from a fire that happened a few years ago, and the guys with the tools in this picture were driving by in a pickup truck, and they had shovels in the back, so they stopped to help put this fire out. And the guy with the tie is one of my teachers, and I'm the guy on the far right there with the fire extinguisher. I got the last flame out that was about 10 feet up a eucalyptus tree, and it was at the outer reaches of the fire extinguisher. And that was a very windy day. And if all these people hadn't got there in time and did what they did, that fire would have gone up here into UCSC, and it could have been really bad. The Davenport Resource and Service Center is an old house that's in a residential area, and they have lots of people coming for social services. And there's no place to park, and they have, I think, 8 storage containers on property because their facility is not adequate for what they want to do. The sheriff recently rented the old winery, the tasting room down there, and they have desk space, but they don't have a sheriff station per se. If you've ever been in the post office, you probably have. It's really small. You can get maybe 3 people in there without bumping into each other. And they have challenges like the ceiling leaks. And I bring all these up because one thing we all have in common, besides having problems with our facilities, is that we don't have the ability to fix those problems. Our campus is 1.3 acres. We can't build a new transitional kindergarten classroom there. We can't solve our problems with our existing funding. And we've all learned to live with it. We accept these challenges because we love the community, and we're good at making do. There's lots of volunteerism in our communities, but being able to cope with that is not the same as it being adequate. I think it'd be important to both make do and appreciate what we have, but also fight for something better. I think what we need is a vision for what could be rather than accepting of what is. The county commissioned a report in 2018 to look at reuse of the cement plants, and they had 4 main ideas in there. One was for industrial manufacturing, which makes sense on a cement plant. There was only one company interested, and that was Joby. And it received some good support, I think mainly because Joe Ben is local. But they couldn't move fast enough on this, and they've flown away, pardon the pun, and landed elsewhere. So that's no longer an option that's on the table. Senior housing, seniors need services, and there are no services in Davenport. So that didn't really make sense. There was an idea for an eco lodge, but Cosanoa is a few miles up the highway. There was an idea for hotels, but there's hotels a few miles down the highway. So all of those ideas There are no proposals behind them. There's no developer saying, I'm ready to go. So they were just theoretical. And ultimately, they all shared some flaws in that they're extractive, not in the sense of raw materials like a cement plant, but extractive in terms of profit leaving the community. And they wouldn't bring many amenities to Davenport. The locals wouldn't benefit from a hotel. There might be a maid job or a waiter job, but there really wouldn't be anything that would allow you to buy a house in the area.
Including your voice.
Yeah, good.
Magic hands. That was actually part of my presentation. There's a soundtrack. And I think if we don't take action, then by default, our strategy is hope. And hope is not a good strategy because it doesn't really do much. And I think that eventually something will be done on this property. And if we don't do it, then some hedge funder from Manhattan or a prince from Saudi Arabia is going to come in with a golf course, and none of the locals will like it. So I think it's important that we seize the opportunity now while we have the chance. The tourist economy, I think, is a known trap, hence the jail. If you do any one of these proposals, what you'll have are low-wage jobs. And if you can't afford to buy a house here, then you're going to have to commute. And those type of jobs, you're going to have to commute from beyond Santa Cruz. It's going to be like Salinas or somewhere. And then you're adding traffic to the one road that goes through town. And if you allow some outsider to do it, it will likely be very generic architecture. It won't be things like the jail or the church. And you won't solve any of the other problems that exist locally. So I think it's important to avoid those kinds of economic cycles. So what I'd like to see is a master plan, not in the sense of what the county means, but in the sense of thinking about what makes sense. If you had a facility where you incorporated housing, then workers could afford to live there. If you had development that included jobs that paid decently, then people could afford to live there. If you thought about connecting Old Town and New Town, then you benefit the local area. If you provide parking, like right now, people park, if you know where Marine View is, it's on the top side of the school. People park there in the dirt, and then the bus can't get by. And that happens on a regular basis. And you have people letting off kids in the middle of the street because there's no place to pull over. And those are flaws of not only the existing reality, but the planning that either happened or didn't happen earlier. And so what I'd like to see is no longer living in the past of a cement plant from 1905, but thinking about the future needs of the community and using this space, this property, as an opportunity not just to redevelop that property, but to solve other problems that exist in the community. This, by the way, is a rendering of what the school could look like. I've been working with a friend of mine who's a high-end architect, and she specializes in things like museums and hotels and concert halls. And she's had very wealthy clients like the Saudi royal family. And since I know her, she's working for free for me, which is a great price, and it's one I can afford. This is another rendering of the school. So what I'd like to see is redeveloping this property where you meet all the needs that exist. For example, you could design a community meeting center that doesn't try to double as a transitional kindergarten classroom. You could build a resource center that is built as a resource center and not a small house, including all the storage that they need. I mentioned housing, so you could have the workers live where they work and work where they live, and therefore don't have to commute, and therefore don't impact the roadways. And a lot of this housing, a lot of this property is zoned agricultural, not obviously the industrial part, but the part closer to Newtown. And also along the cement plant property includes the bluffs there. And so you could use that farm to grow food for the school. You may or may not have heard that one of our signature programs at Pacific Elementary is that the students cook lunch for the whole school every day from scratch. We have a garden, it's a nice garden, but it's more of a demonstration garden. It's more of a science lab. It's not a productive farm. But if we had a productive farm, then we could actually grow food for the kids to eat. It's not just to prepare, but to actually take it from the soil to their mouths. So how do you get this done? You're going to need buy-in. And I've talked with all of the people on this list. I don't sleep a lot, which gives me a lot of time to think. I'd rather be asleep, but I think. And so I have what I call my lottery fantasies. What would I do if I won the lottery and had all this money? Well, I was telling a dad at the school, one thing I'd do is buy the cement plant and build a school there. And he looked at me and he says, we could do that. I said, wait a minute, you're taking me seriously? No one takes these ideas seriously. And he came back to me 2 weeks later and he's like, I found him. I said, found who? And he said, the whale. I said, you found someone who's interested in funding this crazy idea? And he said, yeah. So we set up a meeting at school and the guy didn't show. And we thought, it's too good to be true. And so we're thinking like, okay, back to the drawing board. What are we going to do? And then there's this honk and we look up and there's this guy in a convertible Rolls Royce going, I'm just looking for parking. And I was like, see, parking's the problem. But we met with them and I was explaining to him my vision and he kept interrupting me, pulling out his phone and dialing people. And he's like, the guy's answer, yes, sir. And he's like, there's a property in Davenport, cement plant, find out who owns it and how much they want for it. Yes, sir. And he hangs up on them and like in the mid answer. And then he calls up someone else and he's like, okay, I need housing for workers. Yes, sir. And hangs up on them. I'm like, oh, this guy's got people. And he says, I like first responders. I want you to include the sheriff and the firefighters as well. So I called up the unit chief for San Mateo and Santa Cruz counties, explained to him what I was thinking. And he's like, I have the same problem. I want to double my firefighters, but I don't have housing for them. And I have guys commuting from the eastern side of the Central Valley, and because that's where they can afford to live. And I want to move the main fire station from out in Swanton, which, by the way, the school has a 16-minute response time. That's why we put out the fire before the fire department got there. He wants to put it in Davenport, which is closer to where most of the people live. And he's like, I can't do that unless I have a new facility. So I'm in. And I talked to the sheriff, who happened to be a dad at the school at that time. He's since retired, but he introduced me to the new sheriff. And same thing. They've got deputies that can't live here and they want to increase their presence on the North Coast, and they can't do that without a facility. And as I mentioned earlier, they have a desk rented now in the wine tasting building, but they don't have a police station. I talked to the postmistress in Davenport. She's also a parent at the school. And she calls us several times a week saying, come pick up your packages right now. We can't put them inside the building. There's no room and it's starting to rain, so hurry. Their facilities inadequate, and so she's on board. I talked to someone who's interested in directing an outdoor school. Justin mentioned the Coastal Commission earlier. One of the things we have to get permission for is the Coastal Commission, and what they want is, one of their mandates is visitor serving and coastal related. Those are the two main mandates. Housing used to be a third mandate, but that dropped off the radar at some point. But no one in Davenport that I've talked to wants a hotel, which is what they mean by visitor serving. And so what I was thinking of is a outdoor school. You may be aware, if you've had kids go through Bonnie Doon Elementary, that the kids go to outdoor school in 5th grade or 6th grade. And There's only there's 3 places in the county, but we could do one and do it better than the existing ones. And that could represent visitor serving, the sense that you could stay there if you had like a wedding or corporate retreat or something, but it wouldn't really be a hotel. I've met with Justin's staff and talked with Justin about it. They're cautiously supportive, I would say. Not endorsing by any stretch, but I was talking with Justin just before this meeting, and he's saying, yeah, you can't get Cemex to call you back or answer the phones. And I've talked with 3 employees in Cemex, and they've told me that they have a policy that they don't answer phones or emails. So it's really difficult to work with them. I don't know how you run anything with that kind of policy, but and then, of course, we need buy-in from the community, which is why I'm here tonight. And I've presented the same kind of presentation for the DNCA. And so far, I've gotten really good feedback. I've met one person who opposes it, but they misunderstood a lot of what I was trying to do, so I don't really count that. And I think that's because what I'm trying to do is serve the existing needs of the community and use existing institutions. I'm not talking about bringing in anything from the outside. Like, the school already exists. It's just a bad facility. We need a new campus. The fire already exists. The sheriff already exists. Like, these things are present now. They just don't have what they need to do the job they want to do. I included the church here because one of the things I've been working with on the architect is that we want to replicate the architecture that exists already. We don't want to do like a high-rise glass steel structure that doesn't fit in, although there already is a high-rise steel structure there. So maybe, so the process for getting this done is that we need approval. First of all, we need to buy it. That's been tricky. And I will say that my whale is mercurial. It's difficult to work with very wealthy people, I've discovered. But he's supportive. Every time I get in front of him, he's like, I'm 100% in, we're doing this. And then when I'm not in front of him, he's got other projects going on and he forgets about me. But we'll make it work. And if anyone has connections to other whales, let me know and maybe get them on board. I talked to Ryan Coonerty about the Coastal Commission, and what he told me is that you need some things that meet their 2 main directives. And so I started talking, I forget his title, but the director of the BLM for this area. He wants in and he wants a visitor center, so we've designed that as well. And that is coastal related because it allows people to visit the national monument. Things like fire and sheriff are considered coastal related because they help people visit the coast safely. And if we connect to the bike trail and provide a path to the beach, because the cement plant property includes places where people currently park and access the beach. At a certain point, the other parts of the development become like they ride on the coattails. So school is not coastal related, it's not visitor serving, but if you've got these other things going on in the development, then it can work out. There's all kinds of county and states entities that we need to get approval from. Schools, for example, have to go through the Division of State Architects. But I think all that is doable. This image is of the dorm for the science camp. So I mentioned the whale, and usually when we think of wealthy people, we think of either greed or philanthropy. But there's something in it for them, right? What my whale's interested in is a few things. He is interested in a tax write-off. So if he makes a big purchase, excuse me, cleans up the property, and then donates it, he took something that wasn't worth much because it was industrial wasteland, turn it into something valuable, and it's worth more, and he gets a big tax write-off, which is what he needs. He also told me something interesting. He's like, I've got all the money I need, and I can live anywhere, and I like this area. He has houses in many places, but his main headquarters is Santa Cruz. And he says, but I can't enjoy my life, even with all my money, if I don't have a middle class that's functional. I can't go to a restaurant if there's not a waiter. I can't have my house if it catches fire and there's no one to put it out, or someone's trying to rob my possessions. I need the sheriff to respond. Like, I want the middle class to work in this town. And so this is what I'm trying to do to make it work. What Cemex gets out of it is they get to unload an unproductive asset and maybe make a tidy sum doing so. Should I admit Marty here? Or some? Sorry, Marty, didn't notice you there. And what the community gets out of it is a functional town with good facilities that meets the local needs. Now I can't move forward again. There we go, it worked. I was talking about this, there we go. This, by the way, is a rendering of the classroom. And I'm excited about the classrooms. I could geek out over this with you, but you get the idea. It's pretty. I think another thing that we get out of it is that we do something that works for us rather than waiting around for somebody to do something to us. I don't think we'll like it, whatever it is that someone else does. So we might as well get in there while the getting's good. This is a schematic of, it's actually a little bit outdated, but it's a schematic of what the layout would look like. This main area here, the trackpad's not working. This area up top here, that's the school. And it's got everything I would want in a school. When you're spending someone else's money, it's fun. These smaller squares are classrooms, and then these other rectangles next to them are, each classroom would have their own courtyard. So you could send kids outside and still be able to see them. There'd be a little stage out there where they could do, classroom plays. And then it's got all these large spaces for a theater, a science lab, a maker space, a gym, those kinds of things. And this down here in the center is like the office space. And everything you could think of in a school would have their own office space. And then these green rectangles are fields, and then like basketball courts and play structure. And that pier would be the cafeteria. And then there'd be a Life Lab science area here. This is a little out of date, so it's not exactly where things would really be, but over here, it says sheriff. That's now going to be over on the right side. And that would be a real police station with everything that they need. But over here now would be the BLM offices with the visitor center for the Coast Dairies. The fire department would have a facility here. We're working on a design for that. There'd be over here a community space, which would be both a meeting room like this, but also it would have everything you need, like a stage, for example. There'd be a post office, and then this area is like the town green with parking all around it. So it includes basically everything that you could want. Because it's being designed by a friend, it can be whatever design we want and whatever we think of too. Like, I'm not an urban planner. I'm not a developer. And this is fun to mess around with because it can become what we want it to become. This is an image of the theater from the outside. But one of the things I think is most interesting about this is that, again, you can use this to address all the needs that you already have in a holistic way. So you're not waiting for other crises to happen or objecting defensively when someone's trying to do something to you and you don't want it to happen. You can use it to solve problems. Like you can build staff housing, you can provide middle-class jobs, you can make it affordable, you can retain your staff, you can provide parking, you can deal with pollution, you can make plans for water use, you can address traffic along Highway 1. You can solve, we have an enrollment problem. You may have noticed if you're involved with Bonnie Elementary, like the number of kids are shrinking. But all these things are possible to address. But we've got to do it ourselves before someone does it to us. So that's my crazy idea. I'm not a developer. This is not my area of expertise. I have a day job. I don't know what I'm doing, but I know that I should be doing something. And I think this is an idea worth considering. And ultimately and soon, I'd love to hand it off to other people. But I'm going to keep pushing it as long as there's anyone who will listen. I'm going to keep pushing to it. When it gets done, I will definitely be retired. I'll probably be dead, but it's still a good idea. And so somebody should do it. And I'm open to questions if you have any. Yes. So I've met with a lot of people about this. And one of the people I've met with said that they, I lost my train of thought, that they are cleaning it up. Yeah, one of them was someone who is involved in cleaning it up. And he's not talking about it publicly, but he does have a company that's working on it. I don't know how much they've done. He kind of off the cuff said around half of what needs to be done. But I think in terms of time, it's still a number of years. But there's also some permanent pollution that will have to be monitored and dealt with ad nauseum, like forever.
Fit in terms of what the existing footprint is now, just like off on Cement Plant Road, in the parking area that's there.
Yeah. The question is, where would this be sited? Oh, now I'm out of here. What did I do wrong? Share, okay. And here, I'm gonna share. Okay, and slideshow. Your mouse is really different than mine. Resume slideshow. Oh, I've got Justin's. That's not the one I wanted. Share. This one. Okay. And didn't I want to go to slideshow? Maybe I'm resuming Justin's slideshow. No, I'm in the right slideshow, but it's not pretty.
But it's not pretty. Let's see if we get into.
Well, I'll answer your question as we're figuring this out. On my computer, I could show you, but what I'm talking about, yeah, we'll go to that one. There we go. So the area surrounded by the red line is the cement plant property that's still available and not the Coast Dairies property. The two spots on the left are both zoned agricultural. You couldn't build there. The whole thing is, well, the whole thing I want to buy is not for sale. They're not trying to sell it, but I'm still trying to buy it.
He's right along, street there.
Right. And then this area in the bright green is on the coast and you couldn't build there. The part that I'm interested in is the purple area. This narrow strip here is that steep gully that I don't know if anyone could ever build anything there, and there's probably red-legged frogs there. Even within this, what's that? I think they are there. Like, at least there are scientists that were looking for them during this, when the county commissioned their report. And they couldn't get down there because it was too steep, but they concluded because there's water there, they probably were there, and that was good enough for them. And I'm just going to trust them because I'm not going to build anything there anyway. But even within this purple area, which is the industrial area, what I'm talking about would be about a third of it. It'd be about this area. And I have an overlay where I can show you that. There's another question over here. Yes.
Years long.
Yes.
They're visionary.
Mhm.
And also the connection to the city, the development and time
Mhm.
thing. Still similar. There was a couple of foundations that did just this kind of thing, like repurpose industrial sites, like cannery and something else. And in this case, it was arson with housing, theater, etc. This strikes me as very similar thing, with the name of the nonprofit that did this. I'm sure that if you got in touch with people, like the original Tannery project, they would have loads of experience to share with you. But when you said, you know, I'm going to hand this off to them, I thought, you got to be the name, and somebody has to carry it all the way to the ribbon. No one else is going to buy into your vision. So it's beautiful. Like, no question. That was the first thing that came to mind. But it was also
She was saying that she worked on the Tannery Arts Project and converting that from industrial use to an art center. And that I could learn a lot from the people involved in that process. And that it's important to have a person with a vision to carry the vision all the way through to the ribbon cutting. Yes, I agree with you. And I still have a day job, and I don't know anything about development. And what I've found in this process, I've been working on it for 2 years now, and there are a lot of people who are experts in a lot of aspects of this. I'm not an expert in these things. If you need a kid to learn how to read, I'm your guy. But if you want to develop a cement plant, I just got an idea. I don't know how to develop a cement plant, but there are people who do. And I've met, for example, with 4 different companies that do industrial cleanup. And there's a dad at Pacific Elementary who's a hydraulic engineer, and so I do things like the people do industrial cleanup turn me on to this site about there's a state website that tracks industrial cleanup, and he went on there and he read everything and he understands it all. I don't speak water pollution, but he's saying like there's no things that can't be done here. This is all feasible. It's going to take work and money and time. But I think my role is finding those people and connecting them with each other and eventually hiring them and paying them to do the work. And maybe when I retire, I'll do more active coordinating, but I'm still trying to run a school, and I enjoy that. I've met with people who do housing, especially worker housing, and they have these careers and they have this expertise and they know what they're talking about. And it's really fun for me to discover these areas of like talking to the people who supply water for the county. They know what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing it and they're good at it. And I've learned things like, for example, I called the water department and said, how many houses could be supplied new hookups in Davenport? And they said 12. And then I looked at the county reuse report and it said 400. And I said, so how do you explain the difference between 12 and 400? And I talked to the guy who actually does the hands-on work. And he said, oh, both answers are true. So what do you mean? And he said, well, under the current existing system, you could do 12 and be fine. But if you want to do more than 12, then you can make improvements to the system. And maybe you get to 50 or 100. But if you want to do more than that, then you need to make a new system. There is water, as you all know, California gets most of its water from a few winter storms that are really big, and we save some of the water and most of it goes down to the ocean. So if you invest in storage and capture, then you could build more houses. And when I talked to the leaders of all these institutions, they said that I asked them, how many workers do you expect to have in the future, or would you like to have in the future? And if you add them all up together, except for the science camp, it'd be 101. And those people presumably all have families. And so you multiply by 2.3 or whatever the average number of people in a household is. And you start adding all these people. Like, could the water supply support all those people? And the answer is, yeah, sort of. But you need to do something. You need to invest in water infrastructure. Again, I'm not an expert in this stuff, but there are people who are. And so, yeah, my role is like the visionary and finding these people and connecting with each other and eventually hiring them to do it. Yes. Yeah, so if the whale purchases this and cleans it up, and then we build things on it, and then he donates it, he's going to have to donate it to something. Oh, I'm sorry, the question was, are you going to have an advisory board? I forget that there's people out there in TV land. And so there need to be a nonprofit started. It would need to be mission driven because it would need to accept this donation, and it would need to own and manage the property in the interest of the vision. So that would need people on it who are willing to do that work and keep it true and on the right track. But I would want to start that earlier so that there's opportunities for people to help shape the vision and meet the needs and meet the experts and make the connections. Yeah.
There's probably tons of folks who have specific expertise, but actually Rachel took my question, which is, wow, we already did this with the tannery in a bit of a different, and I don't know how familiar you are with the tannery, but I mean, it was a huge project taking a leather tannery and converting it to this living arts center. And it's different, but it seems to me that if you thought about having an advisory board that just kind of helped move your vision forward, but who also had expertise, I'm sure somebody, Rachel, might be able to recommend from the tannery might say, oh yeah, well, here's where we had problems and here's what we also need to do, and this is a great idea, but have you thought of this? And it seems like now is a good time to have an advisory board, just even like it's like a visionary advisory board before anything, is before the whale buys anything, because I believe that the more defined that you can make your vision, which is amazing, and we love to have something like this instead of cement plant, that it just allows it to be more put together and marketed before he buys it on this kind of whim of, oh, we're going to do this kind of thing. More detail and information out probably would be helpful.
The comment.
Like, especially like, there's the North Coast Association, and there's some really wonderful, smart people on that, like John Barnes, the architect, who's amazing, and I think these folks would have to be good on some kind of advisory board. Anyway.
The comment was that now is the time to start the nonprofit so it can function as an advisory board now, so that the vision gets more fleshed out and more detailed, rather than waiting till later when we're ready to accept a donation of the property. And I agree with you. I think you're right. And I have met with a lot of people, including John Barnes. But it's been one-off conversations and meetings as opposed to an organized entity. And yeah, just listening to you talk makes me feel relieved. Like I'm feeling overwhelmed, like trying to do all this, and I've got other stuff in my life. But it'd be great to offload some of that burden to other people who are interested. And as I said earlier, I've met one person who's opposed to it. I think there's a lot of support, and I'm amazed at how many amazing people come out of the woodwork. Like I mentioned, that dad who is a water engineer. I just saw him as a preschool dad. I didn't know he had another life, but he knows a ton that is very helpful. So if I can get people like John Barnes and that dad involved, and maybe a regular meeting schedule and delegating responsibilities, that would be great.
I think that if you had an organization, that in itself might attract more people, more organizations with money. I think they would rather see an organization, an entity that has some sense of power, or instead of one individual walking around visionary, which, I mean, you amaze me. You know, you're taking on something that's just huge. I don't know how you do it. I don't know where you get the energy that you come this far, but there's got to be some organization developing here in this process. You're probably at the doorstep of it right now as you're standing here tonight listening to some of these people. But wow.
So the comment was echoing the need for the organization now, for not only for the expertise, but also for the funding. If there's an existing organization, a nonprofit, then people could donate to it. And as far as I mentioned earlier, I don't sleep much, so I have lots of time for things. Not the healthiest way to go through life, but that's what I do. Yes.
I wonder if there's some sort of organization that's an incubator type of too, that would, because I think starting is perhaps the difficult part of shifting from you to others. What's the first thing you need to do? Is it a project manager? Is it, just who's the first person that you need to add to you in order to then add the third and then the fourth and the fifth? And so I wonder, is there a coach? Is there some sort of incubator that could help you to get to that, just the next step? What's the next step rather than the giant vision?
The comment was about the idea of an incubator organization and what would be the first step. Who do you need to get involved first, who then in turn figures out what to do second, third, and so on. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, my expertise is in schools that already exist. So I'm not part of that startup culture, but that's the kind of mentality that we need to move it forward.
Does anybody know Santa Cruz, if there are that type of organization that?
The comment was the Community Foundation of Santa Cruz County can help do that. And I have talked with them. I did talk with someone from the Santa Cruz Community Foundation about being the fiscal sponsor. And I learned a lot, and part of what I learned is that there's a whole other world there that I'm not very familiar with. And I also talked to, have you heard of Santa Cruz Works? I talked to the guy who's running that, and they're mainly about supporting local infrastructure for the technology effort. But that's part of like that incubator mentality and that startup mentality. They ran an article in their weekly newsletter about this, and the first year out of the 2 years that I've been doing this was all hush hush because the whale wanted to try to see if we can get it done without making it public, because that could in turn raise the costs of this because there might be competitors. But after about a year of that, I got impatient. And it's like, that's not working. We got to build support. So that's what I've been doing now. But reaching out to Santa Cruz Works, there's a lot of people that have heard of this now and have either advice or interest. And so I think combining all these groups on an advisory committee and getting someone to help launch it would be a good next step.
Apropos of that, I think whenever you've got an idea that depends on a whale, you need to test the whale. And with my limited experience, what can work is set them up for making a minor contribution early on. If it shows up, you've got a whale. If it doesn't, you don't. If you're creating an advisory board, they need an operating budget. See if the whale's good for 50 or 100,000.
The comment was, if you have a project that's dependent upon a whale, test the whale to see if the whale's really serious about it. And so if you have an advisory committee, then they need a budget, and the budget would help get things started. And so if the whale's willing to donate a more modest amount, like 50,000 or 100,000, then you do have the whale on the line. And if he's not, then you haven't hooked that whale. Good point. Yes.
Yeah, it's a elementary, so like, expanding program or re-envisioning program around like a different educational, I won't say different educational mission, but something that might tie into other philanthropic foundations that have educational missions that might be willing to donate to something that aligns with them. Or are you planning on keeping like the core of what you do, the core of what you do? I'm curious your thoughts on that.
So the question was, does Pacific Elementary plan to stay as is, or does it plan to expand and take on a larger role? So my political answer is that's a question for the board. I serve the board. But if you're asking me, I would like to see the school expand, not in the sense of growing horizontally. I brought up this image because if you count the number of classrooms here, it's more than we have and more than we need. And what I was thinking of, if you're gonna do this, do it right. Do it right from the beginning. So on here, there's one classroom per grade level, but the grade levels go from preschool to adult ed. Every year, the sixth grade parents come to me and lament that the school ends at sixth grade and they'd love to see it go through high school. And I would like to see it go through high school. Our district is an elementary district. We can't expand to high school. There are, however, charter schools that already exist. And I talked with the head of school at Pacific Collegiate School, and he liked this vision, and he questioned whether people would be willing to make the commute, because PCS is already located sort of on the edge of the population center. And would they go 10 miles up the highway to this? And he highly doubted that. And I said, they already do. 3/4 of our students are attending on inter-district transfers. And they come from Half Moon Bay and Pescadero, Capitola, Aptos, and Live Oak, Boulder Creek, Scotts Valley, Bonnie Doon, and on the west side of Santa Cruz. So if they're already doing the commute, then doing it longer is a more likely scenario. And PCS has a facility, but I think we can design a better facility. And we work with the Santa Cruz Metro, and they bring their buses right to the campus every morning. And we have about 20 to 30 kids who ride the bus every day. And those are elementary kids. The older the kids get, the more likely they are to ride the bus or even drive. And if you have parking, they can park. But adult ed, that's actually run by PAHRO, District, which is in Watsonville and Aptos, they run adult ed on our campus at night. So these things already exist. They're just they have bad facilities. We could offer better facilities to make it work. I should.
Seventh and eighth grade.
Yeah, and PCS, for example, has 7th and 8th grade, which is sort of, they start right where we end. So it could be a nice transition. And we both have Pacific in the name, so it's a no-brainer. Yeah, there would need to be some things that would happen. You have to get even more buy-in to make it happen. But it's a possibility. And I should say, I'll be retired before any of this happens. And so it'll be a task for the person who follows me. And maybe the person who follows Chris at PCS, but I have trouble sitting still. The question is, what am I doing in my retirement? I would do this. Yeah, I would get more involved in this project. I would still be humble enough to realize I'm not a developer, that I need other people to do this work, but I like being active. I like being involved, and I do not do well with being bored. So I would help, yes. The comment was, we've heard a lot of good ideas about next steps, and her question is, what's my vision for next steps? I agree with the crowd that we need an advisory committee or a nonprofit or some kind of organization to spread this beyond me. And I agree that we need funding to do it right. I've found that I've come across a lot of volunteers who help out a little bit, and a lot of people can't sustain that because they have their lives going on. So I can't expect them to do more than what they're doing. But that's what needs to happen to make this happen. We need to have more people give more time and more energy, and use their expertise in a productive way. And I'm one of those people that has other things going on in their lives, so I can't give much more than I'm already giving. But I'm one person, and if there's 10, 20, 30 of me, then we can get something done. The one part that I keep dwelling on that really needs to happen is the purchase. All this is just a neat idea unless we actually own the property. And I did talk to someone at CEMEX. It took me over a year to get through to somebody at CEMEX who had the authority to discuss this. And his response was, make me a good offer. And I said, what do you consider a good offer? And he said, make it good. So I didn't learn a whole lot about what a good offer is, but I did learn that it has to be good, which means money. So what CEMEX is interested in is two things. They think that they're sitting on California coastal real estate, and that sounds like a gold mine. I think realistically, they're also sitting on an industrial waste site, which isn't quite the idea of Hearst Castle. But they want adequate compensation for the resource. The main thing they want, this is like one of the first things out of his mouth, was you have to accept liability. They want out from the cleanup. They want out from whatever problems result in the future as a result of what they've done to the property. But that's why I've met with these different companies that do this work and talked to the different experts about what realistically is happening. And what they all agree on is the cleanup is possible. It's already underway, and they all know how to do it. So that part doesn't scare me in the sense of, if we buy the property, then we have an albatross around our neck, and now we're on the hook for a lot of money that we can't do anything with. But they all agree that that's not likely to be the case. But there are some things that will need monitoring and dealing with in perpetuity. So there will be an ongoing cost. For instance, there's already a landfill on site, and you need to monitor that. And there's some sensitive areas there, not just the red-legged frog, but one of the the leaks is heading towards the cliff. Cleaning up a cliff is more difficult than cleaning up a flat land. And it doesn't have very far to go to get the ocean. And then you enter another realm of problems. So the sooner we clean it up, the better. And it's better because you reduce costs and reduce issues. But it can be done. And so if we purchase it, then we can do that faster. And then all the rest of it becomes feasible, but the purchase has to happen. But
Fix for water.
the question was about water. I mentioned earlier about how we'd need to, if this vision were to be realized, we would need to expand the water system or invest in a new water system, depending on the number of housing units we build. Isaac Bojorquez, who's the hands-on guy in Davenport and the water system for the county, I called him on his day off. I didn't realize it was his day off, but he talked to me for over an hour about this. What his vision is that he would like to see storage increased. He's like, you may have noticed we have fire problems here. I was like, yeah, I've noticed. He said, you need storage to fight fires, and you need storage to weather droughts. And the water exists. It just doesn't always exist when you want it and where you want it. But if you build storage and invest in the systems to clean the water, then you can fight fires, then you can weather droughts, and you can still be fine, and you could have housing. So that's his idea of what's key, and I believe him because he's an expert and I'm not. Yes.
So in terms of the cleanup, it seems like that needs to be done before the land is donated to your project. You don't want to accept the donation without having all the remediation being done.
The question is, do you want the cleanup before you accept the donation? And yes, I agree. Because so right now, the Pacific School Foundation, which is the PTA for Pacific Elementary, they're accepting donations for this project. That is not their mission. Their mission is to support the school. And they're kind of fudging it a little bit, saying, well, if we build a new school, that's supporting the school. So they're accepting donations. They do not want to be have an albatross hung around their necks. Or if you create an advisory committee, a nonprofit, they don't want that either. The cleanup is crucial because until the cleanup happens, it's just a liability. But if the cleanup's done, then it's usable land and you can do the rest of it.
I mean, that includes removing most of the buildings.
Yes, it does. So these industrial cleanup companies, they say that you can reuse the concrete and you can sell the steel. And they said you could, depending on market conditions at the time, you could even make a profit from the steel. So it will be very expensive, but it won't be as expensive as I first pictured because of reusing the cement and selling the steel. But there's a lot of just industrial waste too. Yeah. The comment was he could see the cleanup cost being as much as the purchase of land. And I said, yes, plus construction. It's an expensive project. Yes. The question is, how much is the whale willing to shoulder? And I'll give you an answer, and my real answer is I'm not sure. He has said that he's willing to pay for the purchase, the cleanup, and the construction of school, sheriff, and fire. He has not mentioned being willing to pay for the other things like the community center and the BLM and that kind of stuff. Sometimes he says housing, sometimes he doesn't. But these are all theoretical ideas. There's no dollar sign attached to any of this yet. So if the dollar sign is low, he might do it all. And if the dollar sign's high, then he might back off a little bit. I don't know. Which is part of the reason I'm interested in other whales. Yes.
Um, Well, it sounds to me like a really good idea. I'm very impressed and at the work you've done and how much you've accomplished, so far. So, I really hope that, you get the support you need from the community and from all of the other resources that you're pulling in. Really, it's amazing, amazing project.
The comment was, thank you for my work and for my vision. And she's amazed at how much I've been able to accomplish. And yeah, thank you in return. And I enjoy it. I like these kinds of ideas. And one of the things that has excited me about working in education is that you don't see a lot in the moment, but you have this like great payoff in the future. And that makes me think about the future a lot, and what could be, envisioning what could be rather than accepting what is. Because all the kids I work with, like they're just so full of potential, and they'll get there eventually. And I may never see it, but that's what really motivates me working in education. It's fun, and I want a better world for these kids. Like I said earlier, I may not live to see any of this, but they will, and I want it for them.
One chat question. I love this whole idea, Eric. I've lived in Bonnie Doon for decades, and I've always wished there was a community center where we could have small events, support groups, offer classes, etc. Could that be a part of this picture?
So the comment was, I love this idea, and particularly having a community center for events and yeah, I agree with that. I like schools being kind of a community hub. I think they function best when they're really integrated in the community. But schools are also not set up to do everything, right? Like during COVID, we became sort of a default medical facility. And I remember tearing my hair out during COVID, like, we are not doctors. We are not a hospital. We don't know how to do this. And you probably know we do vision screenings and hearing screenings outside of COVID, and we work with dientes to do dental screenings and stuff. We do all these things that we're not trained in, we're not experts in, and we do the best job we can, but the job could be done better. And if we have facilities for it, like a community center that's made as a community center and designed as a community center, like what we have now with the architects, we have a stage and we have a backstage area, and we have a reception area in the front. So you could have a meeting there, you could have a concert there, you could have a square dance there, you get Andy Wilson to come call it square dance. If you design it right, it can be used in a much more efficient way. And you wouldn't have conflicts of interest. Like right now, I mentioned earlier, we have preschool furniture in the place where the community would meet. Doesn't work well. We're trying to do too many things at once. And if you design it the right way, we could do all those things well, and the people who do them well could do them. Yes.
Quick question. Going back to the design of the school, what in your current design, what is your school?
Right now, Pacific Elementary has 183 students preschool through sixth grade.
For those grades, that's what this is designed.
Yeah, what I'm picturing is about 20 kids per class, preschool through high school, and then another classroom for adult ed. And I think if you design it and build it, then in the future, it could serve the needs. You may not have a high school here at first. Those rooms might be empty. But if you decide to add a high school later and then try to build a high school on it, you wouldn't have a good design. It'd be what I was talking about earlier, like there would be no master plan. Have the master plan at the beginning and do it right the first time. And then if you don't use it, well, you spent the money that you didn't use. But if you don't use it at first, but use it later, then it's money well spent. All right. Well, thank you for your attention and time. I appreciate it.